Welcome back to Short Story Theatre. This is Basil Nightingale, here to take you to a brand new, whack job in their Wacks Museum. The exhibit in this room is an example of something that seems impossible and could never happen, and yet it is not only possible, but did happen. Here's our writer and producer Bill Russo to tell you about it.
Thank you, Basil. I'm standing in front of the door to exhibit room number 4. Inside that room is a statue of a young lady, but there's something strange about it. The woman's skin looks blotchy and as hard as a blacksmith's anvil, and her skin is blue. Not the beautiful blue like in the Caribbean Sea, but the murky dark hue found in the waters off the Jersey Shore. The reason for her odd skin color is that when she was found outside on a sub-zero winter's day in Minnesota, she was a stiff, literally a stiff. She perished from exposure, and she looked like a 5.5-foot ice cube. She was pronounced dead by the first medical person to see her, and that was a fair assumption, since the young lady was indeed a solid frozen block of ice. And yet, that woman of ice was thawed out and brought back to life. The subject in question was not a prehistoric cave person whose corpse was gouged out of a mountain of ice in the Arctic. That only happens in the movies. This person was a 19-year-old young woman from Minnesota who was found lying on a sidewalk in sub-zero temperatures in 1981. This unusual exhibit is in room 4 of the Wacks Museum. As always, we spell wax not W-A-X, but W-A-C-K-S. Wax, as in whack jobs, the odd, the unusual, and the unbelievable. If you're not afraid of the cold, come in. Enter through the door of room number 4. Basil Nightingale is inside waiting for you. If you enter, Basil will tell you the story of the frozen stiff who wasn't frozen stiff.
There she is, folks. Dressed in cowboy boots, a light overcoat, a pair of mittens, and no hat. That clothing is certainly no match for the temperatures on the day she died. It was 22 below zero, that's minus 30 centigrade, or Celsius as it's now called. The basic facts of the case are not in dispute, and are agreed upon by sources like the New York Times, the Boston Globe with its world-famous Spotlight team, and Wikipedia. This is a sensational exhibit, but, with very little effort to sensationalize, or dramatize the tale, here are the details. Dateline: Foston, Minnesota. A 19-year-old woman, found outside, frozen like a slab of meat, in 22 degrees below zero weather, was taken to the emergency room, in the Foston Hospital, around 7:30 in the morning, on December 21, 1981. This is the report of the first doctor to see her.
She appeared to be dead. When she was brought in, her skin was too hard to pierce with a hypodermic needle. Her temperature was too low to register on a thermometer. Her face was ashen white, and her eyes were solid, and would not respond to light.
The ordeal for Miss Jean Hilliard began shortly before midnight, when the car she was driving skidded off the road and got stuck in a snowbank. Repeated attempts to dislodge the vehicle caused it to stall. After a number of tries at restarting the car, she gave up and decided to walk back to her friend Wally's house where she had been visiting. It was a walk of 2 miles, in 22 degrees below zero weather, and the high winds made matters much worse, with a wind chill of perhaps 40, or even 50 below zero. Her outerwear consisted only of mittens, cowboy boots, and a coat. She walked about 15 feet short of the 2 miles, before collapsing just outside of her friend's door. Given the severity of the weather, she may have been walking for 2 hours or more, putting her collapse at somewhere around 2 a.m. At 7 in the morning, 5 hours later, Wally Nelson left his house, and spotted something on his walkway. It was the frozen Miss Hilliard. Here's what he said.
I got my car to take her to the hospital. She wouldn't fit in the vehicle. The front seat was out of the question. I tried to put her in the back seat, but I couldn't do it. She was frozen stiff, and was too long to be laid down on the seat. Folding her to make her smaller was not an option, because she was as solid as a piece of steak in the freezer. I had to put her in on a diagonal to be able to squeeze her in.
The doctor who treated her, Dr. George Sather, confirmed Wally Nelson's assessment of her condition.
The body was cold, completely solid, just like a piece of meat out of a deep freeze. None of my medical instruments was of any use because of her frozen condition. The only thing we could do was wrap her in heating pads and blankets. After a while her pulse rose to about 14 beats a minute. The average pulse is about 70 to 80 beats. She was more dead than alive. But following 2 or 3 hours in the electric blankets, she began to improve. She made a full recovery, and after about a month and a half, was released from the hospital, with no adverse effects from her tribulation. I can't explain why she's alive. She was frozen stiff, literally. It's a miracle.
Medical science may not be able to explain it, but the staff of the Wacks Museum has solved the case, and here's a little clue. If you live in the northeast, or the northwestern parts of the United States, you've probably got a plastic jug in your car, filled with the stuff that allowed Miss Jean Hilliard to survive, after losing consciousness and lying on the frozen ground for more than 5 hours, in temperatures of 22 below zero. That plastic jug we're talking about would contain antifreeze. Yes, antifreeze. That's probably what kept the young lady alive. Not the kind made by Prestone, like you have in the trunk of your car. More likely her antifreeze was manufactured by men named Jim, or Jack, as in Jim Beam and Jack Daniels. She had been visiting her friend Wally Nelson, and apparently consumed some alcoholic beverages. We don't know how much, but at least one major, credible source has hinted that it was the alcohol in her system that saved her life, by preventing her vital organs from freezing. She appeared to be dead, and was frozen stiff on the outside, but even at her worst, her heart was still beating, though only 12 or 14 beats per minute, instead of the normal 60 to 100 beats, and blood was still circulating through her system. So before you leave this exhibit, here's a piece of advice. Don't drink and drive. But, keep something made by Jim or Jack, in your trunk, to be used in case of emergency, on a snowy night in Minnesota, when the temperature plunges to 22 degrees below zero. So that was Exhibit 4 in the Wacks Museum. Room 5 is just next door, and the exhibit in Room 5 is about another girl from Minnesota, and when we heard her story, we had to ask ourselves, what's up with these Minnesota girls? If you're ready, let's go look at the exhibit, but here's a word of warning, we already cautioned you not to drink and drive, and now here's another piece of advice. Don't drink and stick your nose, or your head, into places where it does not belong. The subject of the exhibit in the previous room was a 19-year-old Minnesota girl, from the 1980s whose life may have been saved by the alcohol in her system. Flash forward to the summer of 2018. Things haven't changed too much in Minnesota, the land of 10,000 flakes. Oops, I mean the land of 10,000 lakes. Sorry Minnesota. The exhibit in Room 5 is another 19-year-old girl from Minnesota, who found her experience with alcohol and underage drinking to be very exhausting. Exhausting, as in, She put her head in the oversized exhaust pipe of a truck and got stuck in it. Yes, her head really was stuck in the tailpipe, and as uncomfortable as that might be, we suspect it got even worse when the rescue guy fired up his noisy gasoline-powered saw and cut the pipe off, just inches above the girl's head. Was alcohol involved? Is molten lava hot? This story starts, as all such tales must, at a music festival, where the tunes are accompanied by thousands of happy people, and many gallons of alcohol, and we suspect there may possibly have been an illegal substance or two, being shared by the revelers. This particular festival, seemingly patterned after Woodstock, the daddy of all such events, was called Winstock, and took place in Winstead, some 40 miles outside of the twin cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. On the very first day of the bash, 19-year-old Caitlin Strom of Litchfield, Minnesota, was socializing with her friends, when she spotted a bright red truck, with a gaping, gigantic tailpipe. We'll let Miss Strom fill in the details.
We were just all having fun, and I saw this big exhaust pipe. And I was like, hey, my head could probably fit in that. So I tried it. And it did fit. But it didn't want to come back out.
The heroes of this story, the local firefighters, came to the girl's rescue. Using a power saw, they cut the pipe from the car and were able to free her in less than 1 hour.
I was kinda confused, 'cause I didn't know what was going on, 'cause I couldn't see around me, being stuck inside the pipe and all. But I trusted everyone who was around, and I knew they would get me out safely.
The sad news for the young lady was that once she was freed from her self-imposed, circular metal prison, she was greeted by a deputy sheriff, who gave her a citation for underage drinking, and escorted her out of the festival. Don't fear. There's a happy ending to this tale. Our little lady learned a valuable lesson from all of this. What was it? She told us, with a straight face, and a serious voice. She said,
I learned not to stick my head in a tailpipe.
After her brush with the big metal pipe, the 19-year-old became a Facebook sensation, and visited at least one late-night TV show. The exhaust pipe became a celebrity too, and was put on display in a downtown bar and grill. We are now leaving this exhibit. I hope that, like the young lady, you learned a valuable lesson from all of this. Though I can't imagine what it could be, because I'm pretty sure you already knew that sticking your head in a tailpipe is never a good idea.
While Basil continues to wonder about exhibits of 19-year-old Minnesota girls, I'm going to escort you to room 6 of the Wacks Museum. This is Matt Law Book. In this exhibit, you'll get the details of the phantom car crash in the county of Surrey in England. Step inside for the odd tale. Dateline, Surrey, England. December 11, 2002. Before getting to the phantoms, ghosts, spirits, or skeletons, let's place the setting of the weird incident. With Guildford as its main community, Surrey is a county in southeast England, with a population of about 1 million citizens. It is the wealthiest county in the UK. The actual location of the occurrence is Burpham, a suburb of Guildford. It was in this village of some 6,000 souls that a car crash was reported on the A3 interchange on the evening of December 11, 2002. The two-lane roadway is an important connector to the City of London. Local police report that there are about 5 or 6 crashes on the A3 in any given year. During the evening in question, which was a Wednesday, the authorities received multiple calls from residents who reported seeing a car, with flashing headlights, veer off the highway. Officers searched the area for several minutes and found no evidence of an accident at the reported crash site. Until they poked around, in some heavy undergrowth. Pulling aside twisted vines, and hacking away at thick brush, they spotted a damaged Vauxhall Astra, one of the best-selling cars in England at the time. As they waded through an overgrown ditch, where the car was buried nose down, they made a grim discovery. They found the skeletal remains of a man, the apparent driver, and sole occupant of the vehicle. Subsequent information and investigation revealed that the dead person was 20-year-old Christopher Chandler. He had been reported missing some 5 months before his body was discovered, after reports of the apparent crash of a phantom car in the exact same location.
To this day, there remains no evidence that a vehicle crashed into the A3 ditch on the night of December 11, 2002. Despite the fact that there were several calls to police on that very evening, and each caller said that a vehicle with flashing headlights veered off the road and into the woods. It is certain there was no car crash at that location on the night of December 11th. But the skeleton of Mr. Chandler confirms that he did indeed crash into the ditch at that same spot, almost 6 months before his body was discovered. Was the phantom car crash just that? A phantom? Was the driver of the phantom car the ghost of Chris Chandler trying to lead people to the spot where he died? Your curators have no answer to these questions. We merely present this as another exhibit in the Wacks Museum. As always, Wacks is spelled W-A-C-K-S. Wacks. As in whack jobs, the odd, the unusual, and the unexplained. That's it for this episode, folks. The exhibits come from Bill Russo's book, The Wacks Museum. It is available for free on Barnes & Noble, Smashwords, and many other internet booksellers. This is Basil Nightingale speaking for our producer and author, Bill Russo, inviting you to come back and join us again soon. Won't you?